When I first started doing the favorite books reviewing series back in 2009, I made a list of every book that I could think of that I had ever considered to be a favorite book from my childhood, after I started reading chapter books, through to my adulthood. When I started making this series though, I was still reading a lot of books, and I was actually in the middle of several series that I was enjoying but I hadn't finished reading yet because the series hadn't been fully published yet. In 2007, I discovered and began reading two book series that actually did very similar things. They both operated on the premise that all of the various myths and legends that we've heard tell throughout history have some sort of grain of truth, and that those characters from those myths still exist in some form. One of those, of course, was Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson the Olympian series, which I have already reviewed on this channel. You can click here or here, I don't really know which side, but in one of those places on the card to see that review. It'd be here. And the other one was Michael Scott's Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel, which I'm reviewing in this video. When I first started making the favorite book series, I was only halfway through that series because only half the series had been published. And for a variety of reasons, I didn't get around to reading the rest of the series even after the books were published until couple of months ago. All of which is to say that this review is kind of existing in a weird sort of limbo land between favorite and not favorite as far as the favorite books reviewing series is concerned. All of which is probably explanation you really didn't need or want, but this is who I am and I gave it to you anyway. So, favorite books reviewing series number 53, The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel by Michael Scott. No, not that. Yeah, there you go. As far as stories go, The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel definitely falls into the hot mess that I still really enjoyed category of stories, which also includes such stories as Doctor Who, Heroes, and any number of time travel stories from Star Trek. The series is 6 books long, and by the time we get to book 6, the plot has basically exploded into all of these different plot lines, following 4 or 5 different groups of characters, and then kind of, but not really coming together at the end. And of course, the storyteller in me, who writes a lot of stories like that, really enjoyed this plot explosion, but the reviewer in me recognizes that this is kind of problematic from a storytelling standpoint. But let's start from the beginning. The Alchemist, the first book in the series. Here we are introduced to 5 characters who will, at least for the time being, be the main players in the series. First, of course, you have Nicholas Flamel, who is a real-life historical figure who is known for his work in alchemy, which was the study of basically turning things into other things. It's best known for a couple of different things: the ability to turn lead into gold, and the ability to produce the elixir of life from something called the Philosopher's Stone, which was supposed to make the drinker immortal. If you've read the Harry Potter series, and I can't imagine that there are very many of my subscribers who haven't read the Harry Potter series, then you already know a little bit about Nicholas Flamel. Pretty much all you need to know for this series. In this particular story, much like in Harry Potter, Nicholas Flamel is still alive and well. He has discovered the secret to immortality, and he has been living an immortal life for the better part of 7 centuries. Next, we have Nicholas Flamel's wife, Perenelle Flamel, who is also a real-life historical figure, but not one that is as well known aside from just being Nicholas Flamel's wife. In this story, however, she is also a very powerful sorceress, one who it is indicated at several times during the series might even be more powerful than her husband. Acting as the antagonist for our story, we have Dr. John Dee, again, another real-life historical figure known as being the court magician for Queen Elizabeth. In this story, Dr. John Dee is a very powerful magician and also immortal, although he gained his immortality not through the elixir of life, but by essentially selling his soul to a powerful being known as an elder, which we will talk more about in a moment. He's been hunting down the Flamels for centuries, trying to acquire a magical book that they have called the Codex, which contains, among other things, the secret to the elixir of life. And finally, we have effectively the protagonists of this story, Josh and Sophie Newman, a pair of 15-year-old twins who are also really the only characters in the story who are fully made up by Michael Scott. They're not based on any myth or legend or historical figure or anything. They are entirely from Michael Scott's imagination. At the beginning of the story, it seems like they're drawn into this whole narrative due to just random happenstance, but we later learned that they actually contain very powerful auras of pure silver and gold, and therefore might actually be what's referred to as the twins of legend. At the beginning of the story, Josh and Sophie both witnessed the most recent confrontation between John Dee and Nicholas Flamel. In this most recent confrontation, John Dee manages to steal the codex, but, most fortuitously, Josh manages to tear out the last 2 pages of the book while he's trying to get it back from him. Now, without the book, the Flamels only have about a month before they start to collectively age their 600 plus years of life and eventually die. But more pressing than that is the fact that John Dee wants the codex so that he can perform the spell that will eventually bring the race of elders back to Earth. The elders are a race of godlike beings who dominated the Earth before the humans took over. They include many familiar characters from various world mythologies, including Hecate, Prometheus, Odin, Mars, and many others. Dee is helping to return the Earth to that time, but unfortunately, he can't do that without the 2 pages that Josh fortunately ripped out of the book. So even though Dee now has the book, at this point, the hunt is on for those last 2 pages, and so Josh, Sophie, and Nicholas Flamel must make a run for it. And so now Sophie and Josh, along with the reader, are introduced to an incredibly detailed and intricate world where all of these various world myths and legends are, to some degree, true. Various world myths, including Greek, Roman, Egyptian, and Celtic, along with a number of legends, from the Arthurian legend to the legends surrounding Nicholas Flamel himself, all compete for space in a backstory that we really only see glimpses of. In addition, we meet a number of historical figures like William Shakespeare and Joan of Arc, and most notably, Niccolò Machiavelli, who becomes another major character in this series. And the result is, as I mentioned before, something of a hot mess, and it's not aided by the fact that they throw time travel in about midway through the story, which I have kind of mixed feelings about. Like, it's time travel that kind of works, but not very well, and I don't know. However, to its credit, it is a hot mess that at least held my attention through all 6 books. Now, part of this is because, unlike other authors of hot mess fantasy series, looking at you, Piers Anthony, Michael Scott doesn't feel the need to reveal absolutely every detail about the world that he's created. We get snippets, things that are revealed slowly over time, and we're only told what we absolutely need to know at any given moment. So throughout the entire thing, there is an element of mystery to the world, and even at the very end, there are still a lot of things that we don't know. You never really feel like you have the entire world figured out. It is in its own way as complex and detailed as the real world. Although that being said, there are maybe a couple of things that could have used a little more explanation, specifically the way that magic works. We know that magic involves the use of auras, this invisible force or field that exists around everybody, and everyone's aura has a unique color, quality, and odor. We've already talked about Josh and Sophie's auras of pure silver and gold. Nicholas Flamel has an aura of green, which smells like peppermint. John Dee has an aura of yellow, which smells like sulfur. And Josh and Sophie's auras smell like oranges and vanilla, respectively. However, even though we know that magic uses auric power to some degree, the extent of those powers is never fully explained. Like, it's implied that Perenel's use of sorcery is more powerful than Nicholas Flamel's use of alchemy, but the distinction between them is never really made clear. And this basically means that the characters are either magically strong enough or not strong enough to do or not be able to do whatever magical thing is narratively convenient. Now, the characters themselves are also steeped in mystery. I mean, it is called The Secrets of the Immortal Nicholas Flamel, after all. But it may as well be the secrets of pretty much everyone. Even after 6 books, the characters of the Flamels and Dee and Machiavelli and pretty much everyone are still very mysterious. The world and the characters also get more complex as time goes on. At the beginning of the series, there's a pretty clear dichotomy. Flamel's good, Dee bad. But as the series go on and more characters are introduced and we learn more about this world, the line between good guy and bad guy becomes muddier and muddier. In fact, even though the whole series has Flamel's name on it, by the end of the series, he's not really all that prominent anymore. He's basically just another side character to the drama that's unfolding. And I think that's really what keeps this series going. Other than Josh and Sophie, none of the characters really develop, and even Josh and Sophie just kind of develop in that typical coming-of-age teenagery sort of way. But the other characters emerge and pretty much stay fully formed throughout the entirety of the series. And since these characters are at the least centuries and at the most millennia old, that kind of makes sense. What makes the characters interesting is how much we don't know about them and how their accumulated centuries or millennia of experience has shaped them and their relationships with each other and their reactions to what's going on. Of particular interest is Machiavelli, who isn't introduced until the second book, but remains a mainstay throughout the remainder of the series. Machiavelli is actually an interesting historical figure in his own right. He wrote a lot of political books which advocated a method of politics which, at best, might be considered morally gray. But he's also considered by many to be the father of modern political technique, and some people have kind of a hard time assessing his morality. And so Michael Scott took those writings and basically created a character out of them. What would this character be like? Where would his loyalties ultimately lie? And as a result, he definitely has the most interesting arc of any character in the series. The biggest issue with the series, though, is that it almost gets a little too big to handle itself. The first 3 books are pretty well contained and fall into a pretty basic formulaic pattern. The latter 3 books are where things start to get a little nuts, and you have the stories constantly jumping back and forth between Josh and Sophie and Dee and the Flamels and various other groups of characters that are introduced throughout the last 3 books. Until by series end, you have so many different viewpoints and plot lines going on that it's pretty much impossible to tie it all back together. The series is also almost entirely build-up. The climax that the whole series has been building towards really only occurs in the last 20 pages or so, and there's barely any denouement at all. The ending comes on rather abruptly, and although it's satisfying enough, it does leave quite a few loose ends. In particular, we don't know what happens to a lot of the characters that we've gotten to know over the course of the series, and in the case of at least 3 of them, we don't even know if they're alive or dead. They're just kind of left behind and forgotten about. In fact, the whole last book is kind of weird with its pacing, mostly because it keeps jumping back and forth between these different storylines, and by the end of it, a lot of these storylines are just kind of abandoned. The plot twists that make up the last couple of books seem a little rushed as well. It's like the puzzle pieces are there, kind of see the full picture, but they don't fit together quite as neatly as they do in, say, something like Harry Potter. They're not bad plot twists exactly, but they just don't feel exactly right either. It feels like there should have been maybe a little bit more thought put into them. In the end, it's a mostly fun but largely insubstantial fantasy series, at least as far as the story is concerned. There is a lot to enjoy about it, and it's clear that Michael Scott is very, very well versed in his mythology. And I do like the world that he built up around all of these different mythologies. It's actually kind of impressive how much he was able to cram into this world. The series does drag a little bit at times, and I feel like it may have worked a little bit better as a 5-book series rather than a 6-book series. But again, it's a series that held my attention until the end, and it is a series that I would be likely to read again, if for no other reason than to follow what the hell happened in the last couple of books. If I were truly being objective here, I would probably give this a worth borrowing, but to be honest, this really is my kind of story, and I really did enjoy reading it, so I'm gonna bump it up a rating to worth owning used. If it sounds like your kind of story too, then I would recommend giving it a read. And that does it for this Favorite Books review, and in a bizarre change of pace, I actually know exactly what the next book in the Favorite Books reviewing series is going to be. Next up, I'm going to be reviewing another lighthearted fantasy series, this one written more for adults, The Myth Adventures of Skeeve and Oz, or Oz and Skeeve possibly, I'm not really sure, by Robert Asprin. So look forward to that, and until next time, I'm not really sure what's going on as far as genre is concerned. I'm just kind of here, and I haven't really seen any of the other personas yet, so I guess at least for the time being, I'm just going solo.